If you were standing outside the sign chapel this morning, you'd have seen more than just the black smoke rising. Amid the anxious crowd and whispering prayers, a single white dove sat perched above the chapel's ancient doorway. Didn't flinch at the noise, nor did it move when the wind picked up. 4 hours. It stayed watching, waiting, unmoving. Inside the Vatican walls, Cardinal Angelo was feeling the weight of silence. At 78, he had seen 4 conclaves, but this one felt different, more uncertain, more distant from God. He walked the marble halls with a limp, from an old injury. But today it was the ache in his chest that slowed him. Since his sister passed last winter, the loneliness had become unbearable. He hadn't spoken much since the cardinals entered conclave. While others whispered and debated between votes, he often sat alone near the back, clutching the rosary she gave him. Her absence haunted every corner of his day, and though he prayed for guidance, he felt only more lost with each puff of black smoke. Outside, tourists and faithful from around the world looked up at the chimney. Some gasped, not at the color of the smoke, but at the dove. Children pointed. A few elderly women began to cry softly. No one could explain why the bird remained so still, its feathers barely ruffled, eyes fixed forward. Young Swiss guard noticed the bird, too. "Strano," he murmured to a fellow guard. "It hasn't moved for hours." The guards, trained to ignore distractions, found themselves glancing up at the bird. Between shifts, there was something unnerving, almost sacred, about its presence. Back inside, Cardinal Angelo shuffled past Michelangelo's frescoes, the solemn saints staring down. He was supposed to be helping choose a shepherd for the world, but all he felt was the echo of his sister's voice. "Don't let the world harden you, Angela." He whispered her name like a prayer. Just before the evening's vote, a loud gasp echoed from near one of the chapel windows. The cardinal had noticed the dove through the stained glass. Whispers spread quickly. Some dismissed it as coincidence, but others, older, wearier, stared in silence, visibly moved. Cardinal Angelo looked up. Through the colored glass, the dove's silhouette was clear. It sat like a guardian, still and calm against the backdrop of darkening skies. For a brief moment, his heart stirred, not with understanding but with presence. He felt her again, not gone, just changed. As the final vote of the day was placed, and the smoke once again turned black, disappointment rippled through the square. Still no Pope. Still no answer. But no one left. Not tonight. Not while the dove remained. Even the news cameras tilted upward, unsure what to say. And just as the bells tolled to end the day, the dove turned its head toward the chapel door, as if listening. It still did not leave. In that silence, as thousands stood beneath an ancient sky, something sacred passed between them. Not words, not prophecy, just stillness and something deeper. That night, Cardinal Angelo couldn't sleep. He sat by his small window, watching the stars fade behind Vatican rooftops, thinking of the dove. He remembered stories his mother used to tell about doves being messengers, about signs not meant to be explained. For the first time in days, he felt something soft inside him begin to shift. By dawn, the dove was still there. Crowds had returned, many holding candles or whispering quiet prayers beneath the morning haze. A local nun, Sister Beatrice stood near the front, her eyes red from crying. "That bird," she said to a reporter, "is staying until something changes." I believe that. Cardinal Angelo arrived early to the chapel, earlier than the others. His hands trembled as he reached for his rosary, but not from age. This time it was something like anticipation. Something was pulling at him. He looked again toward the stained glass, hoping to see the bird's silhouette. But now, something inside him was different. The dove had stirred not just memories, but a deep discomfort, an awareness of how far he drifted, not from doctrine or duty, but from heart, from purpose. He had been going through the motions since his sister's funeral, carrying his title like a heavy coat he no longer wanted to wear. When the morning vote began, Angelo didn't participate right away. He sat holding his ballot, thinking not of power or leadership, but of mercy, of silence, of the way his sister used to sing to birds in their garden as children. For the first time he wondered, what if we've all been listening to the wrong voices? The chapel was tense. Votes were cast, glances exchanged. A younger cardinal noticed Angelo hadn't moved. He approached, whispering, "Is everything all right?" Angelo nodded faintly, then whispered back, "Have you seen it? The dove." The younger man nodded slowly, unsure how to respond. "It's not waiting for a pope," Angelo said. "It's waiting for us." The words hung in the air. Between them, the cardinal stepped back, confused, but the seed was planted. Others began to notice the shift in Angelo's face. He looked lighter, like someone who had finally remembered where he came from. During the break, Angelo walked outside for the first time in days. The dove was still there, eyes following him. Their gaze met for a long, quiet second. It didn't fly away. Instead, it fluffed its feathers, slightly, as if acknowledging something. He just accepted. His eyes welled with tears. People noticed him. Some even applauded softly, unsure why. It wasn't celebrity. It was recognition. The old man with the heavy limp had just become something else, a mirror. He stepped toward the crowd, placed his hand on the wooden railing and simply said, "We've forgotten how to feel." Back inside, he cast his vote with certainty, not for politics or alliances, but for the one man he believed still listened like a child. A humble priest from South America who had once given up a career to serve the sick. As he placed his vote, the bells outside began to ring, not for a pope, but for a moment that had just begun. The bells weren't signaling a decision, yet something was shifting. Outside, the dove suddenly spread its wings, but didn't fly. Simply repositioned itself, turning toward the crowd, as if acknowledging. Some gasped. A group of elderly women crossed themselves. No one could explain it, but everyone felt it. Inside the chapel, a silence settled. After the vote, the usual murmurs were gone. One by one, the cardinals turned toward Cardinal Angelo. He hadn't said much in days, but now his eyes held a clarity none of them had seen before. He wasn't asking for attention. He was simply present, deeply, fully. The votes were tallied. The priest Angelo had chosen didn't have a majority, but his name had appeared more than expected. Others had cast similar votes, moved by something they couldn't explain. The chamber wasn't unified, but it was no longer divided by politics. It was divided by who had felt something and who hadn't. Outside, the press was restless. Still, black smoke, they murmured. Still no Pope, but something was happening in the crowd. People were staying longer, talking less. An older man from Boston whispered, "I don't know why, but I feel like we're supposed to witness this." Back in the cardinal's quarters, Angelo sat alone at a wooden desk. A young cardinal knocked softly. "May I join you?" he asked. Angelo nodded. They spoke little, but their silence was comfortable. The young man finally said, "You saw something in that dove, didn't you?" Angelo replied, "No, I felt something in myself." That night, the dove was still there, but now it had moved lower, closer to the doors. The crowd grew. Tourists became pilgrims. Candles lined the barriers. Someone began to sing a quiet hymn. Others joined. For the first time, St. Peter Square felt not like a spectacle, but a sanctuary. The next morning, the unexpected happened. The humble priest from South America stood before the cardinals, surprised to see his name rising in votes. He hadn't campaigned. He hadn't lobbied, but something had shifted, and he accepted the possibility. With a quiet nod, his eyes wide with humility. As the final vote neared, Cardinal Angelo stood to speak. It was rare for anyone to address the room. His voice was soft, weathered, but carried the weight of truth. "We came here looking for leadership, but what we need is grace, and I saw it in a dove, and I see it in him." No one interrupted. No one argued. Some closed their eyes. Others bowed their heads. In that moment, the Sistine Chapel felt like it was breathing with something beyond. Not politics, not ceremony. Something older, something sacred. Hush spread as ballots were cast for the final time. And just as the final vote was sealed, the dove lifted off the chapel roof for the first time in 3 days. It flew one slow circle above the crowd, then disappeared into the Roman sky. No one spoke. No one cheered. They simply watched. And when the black smoke rose again, no one felt disappointment. Only a strange, powerful peace. By evening, the dove was gone, but its presence lingered in every quiet glance and whispered prayer. Cardinal Angelo returned to his room and opened a letter he'd carried for months. His sister's last words written before her passing. "When you feel alone, look for the quiet things. That's where God waits." He wept, not from grief, but from gratitude. The conclave continued one more day, but something fundamental had changed. The cardinals moved differently, less concerned with alliances, more aware of intention. When the white smoke finally rose, the crowd rejoiced. But it wasn't just for a new pope. It was for a moment. They all felt together, unspoken, and shared. Cardinal Angelo watched from a quiet corner of the balcony as the new pope, humble, tearful, and stunned, stepped into the light. The crowd erupted, but Angelo didn't cheer. He just closed his eyes, whispering a single word. Finally, he had found peace, not in power, but in letting go. In the weeks that followed, the story of the dove spread across the world. Photos circulated, articles were written, but what truly moved people were the testimonies. It made me feel like I was part of something. A woman in Argentina had It reminded me of my mother, said a boy in Chicago. Thousands wrote similar words. Cardinal Angelo returned home to a modest stone house near Florence. No longer in the spotlight, he spent his days tending a small garden and feeding birds, doves among them. He never spoke publicly about what happened, but when asked, he'd smile gently and say, "Sometimes heaven lands quietly." He began volunteering at a local hospice where many patients face their final days in fear. To them he spoke not of doctrine, but of small moments, a bird, a song, a shared silence. He became known not as a cardinal but as Il Testimone del Silencio, the witness of the silence. The new pope often referenced a grace that revealed itself during the conclave. Though he never gave details, but under his leadership the church shifted, focusing more on presence, humility, and mercy. He kept a simple wooden carving of a dove on his desk. It had no inscription, just wings open. Pilgrims began visiting St. Peter Square, not just for history or photos, but to stand beneath the spot where the dove had waited. Many said they felt something. Stillness, warmth, a kind of reassurance, no miracles, just meaning. And for many, that was more than enough. Cardinal Angelo lived 5 more quiet years. On the day he passed, a dove landed on the hospice windowsill and stayed until sunset. Nurses and patients wept openly, not in sorrow, but in awe. He came to remind us how to see, one of them said, not with the eyes but with the heart. And so the story was passed on, not as legend but as truth wrapped in mystery. Not everyone believed it, but everyone felt it, because sometimes the smallest visitors carry the deepest messages. And as the Pope later said in his homily, he didn't just witness a dove. He witnessed the return of something sacred in all of